The opening move in the United States-Switzerland gold standoff may look tiny on paper, almost buried in the numbers. A 1.2% transaction tax that Bern plans to collect from refiners will add roughly $82 million to Washington's yearly $6.8 billion in bullion purchases. But within the Fed's reserve system, this seemingly minor cost could become a spark, disrupting bond yields, driving up the dollar index, and derailing America's plan to shrink its $48 billion deficit. Utah miners pushing for strict origin tracking, jewelers in New Jersey protesting rising costs, and Switzerland's refusal to compromise on banking secrecy are all tied to the same issue. So what's next for the global gold market in this deadlock? Let's break down how a modest tax, a few swing votes in the Senate, the Fed's repo market moves, and the global gold premium are combining into real pressure. Before we dive in, remember to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like our videos to stay informed. When Washington's latest trade report revealed a $48 billion goods and services deficit for the first half of 2025, the White House drafted a three-part intervention plan: raise tariffs on China in stages, boost incentives for Mexico-based supply chains, and keep high-purity Swiss gold bars flowing under a tax-exempt swap arrangement. While the first 2 points fueled political debates, the Swiss gold issue at first seemed like a footnote. But almost a quarter of that deficit is linked to Switzerland. Not just gold, but also pharmaceutical ingredients and micro-mechanical parts. That same portfolio overlaps with the Fed's gold rotation strategy and its reserves, turning it into one of the thorniest files on Trump's desk. U.S. mines produce about 180 tons of primary gold each year, but much of it goes to the jewelry and tech sectors, leaving a gap in the Fed's reserve needs. That gap is filled by the LBMA plus independent good delivery ingots from 4 Swiss refineries in the cantons of Lucerne, Valais, and Ticino. In the high-purity segment, Switzerland has no real competition, making it essential for the Fed's reserve protocols. On August 4, 2025, Bern announced a draft bill adding a 1.2% transaction tax on gold refined in Switzerland, but sourced from outside the G7. It applies to all shipments headed to the U.S., except for institutions that have signed a mutual reserve swap protocol. Switzerland also won't demand third-country financial reporting, like FATCA, under this protocol. So, in practice, if Washington insists on origin transparency, it actually gets a tax exemption. But if it drops transparency, the gold cost rises, and that, just widens the premium spread. Technically, that 1.2% adds about $82 million to 6 months of Swiss gold imports. It's really just a tiny fraction of the $48 billion deficit. But when gold reserves affect circulation velocity, the result is tighter bond market liquidity, small shifts in yields, and dollar index swings that, honestly, can hurt export competitiveness. The origin transparency rule, enacted by Trump in 2024, is criticized as self-defeating. It shrank the number of refiners, giving Switzerland even more leverage. While Utah's mining lobby supports it, jewelers in New Jersey and Illinois see it as a cost burden. The Senate Finance Committee's balance? Well, it really hinges on these two opposing lobbies. So in Swiss politics, the center-right is actually pushing to raise the gold tax and, use that extra revenue for protectionist spending. Meanwhile, the left would rather see those funds channeled into climate projects. But here's the thing. Both sides absolutely agree there can be no United States exemption unless Swiss banking secrecy is protected. Bern has well tied the gold tax to a bunch of other trade levers. For example, if the United States wants, say, a 15% boost in Swiss pharma imports, it has to accept higher taxes on watches and precision parts. And when it comes to a gold tax exemption, the U.S. would need to soften its demand for origin transparency. Washington's counteroffer, interestingly, includes Defense Logistics Agency certification for Swiss watches, a 2-year FATCA transition extension for Swiss banks, and even putting refiners in a low-risk category under U.S. customs rules. Still, Bern is saying no to lowering the gold tax without some kind of FATCA relief. Behind the scenes, this isn't just about gold. It's about control over financial oversight. Switzerland's other advantage is its key role in mRNA ingredients, monoclonal antibodies, and advanced catalysts. U.S. imports of these hit $13.2 billion in early 2025 and, alternative sources just can't match Swiss capacity. The Fed's stress test shows a $15 per ton jump in the gold premium could raise bond yields by 10 to 20 basis points, boosting the dollar index and honestly hurting exports. This creates a loop where steps to cut the deficit risk widening it through currency shifts. The Senate remains deadlocked. Utah's mining lobby refuses to drop origin rules. Northeastern Democrats want tax relief for jewelers. Swiss refining scale means over two-thirds of the world's bullion passes through 4 cantons. Alternatives like Canada or Australia can't fully replace them without delays and higher costs. Politically, abandoning Swiss gold sounds dramatic, but honestly, it would only cause short-term price spikes. When it comes to pharmaceuticals, Switzerland's hold is even harder to replace because of those slow U.S. certification timelines. And in catalysts, U.S. petrochemicals really depend heavily on Swiss supplies. Bern's so-called better offer to Trump is actually just a stalling tactic. Market data really proves the tension gold's spot price in London rose from $2,012 to $2,030, with premiums spiking from $7 to $16 before settling at $11. Each week of Senate delay keeps the premium elevated. Analysts at UBS warned that a lasting premium could actually shift Forex advantage toward the franc. Meanwhile, JP Morgan says delayed gold inflows could push the Fed to inject $50 to $75 billion in repo liquidity, raising short-term funding costs and, slowing balance sheet cuts. For Trump, this means his less spending, more tariffs deficit strategy could backfire into extra reserve funding costs. Bern, meanwhile, uses the gold tax as a shield for its banking sector against Faytiya-style disclosures. With just a few undecided senators holding the balance, Swiss negotiators gain time, potentially making the tax permanent. The $80 million cost might seem minor, but when mapped onto the gold bond yield dollar index triangle, it's enough to wipe out gains from deficit cuts. In the final stretch, a partial compromise, partial transparency, is emerging. It could trim the deficit by $4 to $5 billion, ease the gold premium, limit the dollar index shock, satisfy Utah's traceability demand, and preserve Swiss banking secrecy. But hidden costs like logistics and insurance would remain. Switzerland's gold play isn't a one-time hit. It's really a slow burn multiplier testing Trump's deficit goals with, a layered equation. The move could shift the nominal deficit by 8 to 9%, but keep yields and the dollar higher than what's actually sustainable. That feedback loop could undercut even aggressive tariffs. Unless the financial side of the deficit is closed directly, the rallying cry "we'll mine our own gold" just won't match the logistical reality. Despite its small size, Switzerland has turned refining skill into diplomatic leverage, multiplying the impact of a modest tax. So, the Fed now faces 3 choices: drop origin transparency for exemption, keep the rule, and pay the tax or restructure reserves with silver and platinum. Each of these has, different impacts on the deficit timeline, dollar volatility, and interest rates. As long as Bern's gold card stays in play, short-term concessions from Washington could totally turn into long-term costs. Every leak from these negotiations could ripple through gold prices. The $48 billion deficit may be a small slice of the money supply, but its political weight is, honestly, massive. If the plan to close it falters in Swiss refinery corridors, a new domestic debate will erupt over who pays the price. Switzerland isn't folding. If anything, it knows the gold card shines brighter each time it's used. In the end, gold's weight won't change, but the cost of moving it will reshape the dollar's global standing. What's your view? Share your thoughts in the comments and, don't forget to subscribe with notifications on to stay updated.